Councilmember James Brown.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Reynolds, for your passion in making the case about this being about safety and just about the city as a whole, and not necessarily the district. I agree. I have a bus stop on Limestone that doesn't have any sidewalks, and people that have to get to that bus stop go into the street. And while I was on MPO, advocated and worked with the staff to get that on the list of funding from the federal government to get that addressed. It hasn't been addressed yet, but we're working towards it. And I can name several other places. So I'm not, trying to minimize that, but there are needs across this city, and we all need to address them. And I appreciate your advocacy for that corridor. And I will say that when Councilmember Henson brought that initiative forward several years ago, I was on this council and supported that. I supported the advocacy for that corridor as chair of Corridors Commission as well. And then when we put money towards that corridor last year budget cycle, and I think that may have been ARPA funding, not ARPA funding, but COVID-related funding that we put towards the enhancements on that corridor were pulled out because it was over budgeted. So I do support this project and do support that initiative. I just think that since it's part of this ARPA discussion, and I think we're at a point where we need additional information, I would move to postpone the decision on your motion until we return to these ARPA conversations in January. So move.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to postpone the decision about this proposal until we come back from break. If you want to speak to this amendment, please sign in.
Can you speak to it? Is it debatable?
It's postponed to a certain time, yes. I believe it's debatable. I don't have the rules. That it is debatable. Councilmember Maloney.
Councilmember Brown, I can't support because we're talking about ARPA money, and I gave you my argument that I believe this is ARPA money because of what has happened to all you. You all asked to do infield redevelopment. For Sales Road, it's been the heart and soul of a lot of these developments in the last 3 years to help some of these folks to keep them from being homelessness, and that is part of the ARPA money too. And this sidewalk is something that's been left out that most of these people cannot afford a car or cannot drive, and they have to go on a sidewalk. That to me, we are discussing an issue that is considered ARPA to me, and that's what this meeting's about. So I would vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kloiber.
I want to thank Councilmember James Brown for making this motion. I think that the more information we have, especially on something as big as infrastructure projects across the entire city, is going to make it easier for all of us to make a decision in context. So I will be supporting this motion. I'm excited to hear all the information we're going to get from the administration when we come back from break, and I think it'll make us a lot easier for us to support things like this motion coming forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Worley.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And I'll support the motion to postpone in hopes that when the discussion continues, I would like to see possibly what the next phase would cost and what our possible spending options and maybe to fund an entire project. I certainly support pedestrian safety enhancements, particularly in areas of town where folks need it, but I think there are areas of all of our districts without sidewalks. That being said, one of the things that my colleagues supported me years ago was a sidewalk project. This is to provide access to the library and to jobs for a low-income neighborhood, and I've always appreciated that and been very proud of that project. So I would like to see this project. I'm just not sure I'm ready today to put such a large project on the list when we are where we are. So I like the motion to postpone so we can maybe talk about different ways to do this when we come back, and maybe we'll have some more information about the infrastructure money from the federal government coming down at that time. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Maloney, would you mind taking the chair? I'd like to speak.
Sure, Vice Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm going to support the motion to postpone for the reasons that I've already cited. there will be ample opportunity to have a full discussion of the value of the project after we return from break, and we have a lot more information, not just about it, but about many of the other projects that we have on our list. I think it's just appropriate to have the full discussion at that time. As much as I understand the need on Versailles Road, and I've been on council long enough to have had two esteemed colleagues advocate well for their constituents and for that road, and we have made a lot of progress on it. I understand that there's more that needs to be made, but I believe that conversation needs to be in context. So I will support the motion. May I have the chair back, sir? Thank you. I see nobody else signed to speak to the motion to postpone until we return from break. If you'd please vote electronically. That vote reflects passage of the motion. Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak at this time? If not, I have a housekeeping, and that is CAO Hamilton. I have a question for you, but if you've got a comment first, I'll be happy to hear it.
I wanted to make sure that we were on the right track, what we're going to bring back to you. And to give you an idea, like we have already talked to two of the projects that were on the list and one of them was Greenhouse 17 and one of them was the Hope Center. And we would be able to tell you when we come back where we think those projects are, if they're feasible, and what kind of time frame in which they are feasible. We also will, and we will do that with several projects. So for your information, whatever you want to do with that information. Then what we intended to do was to take that $121 million and try to place these projects. Now, realizing that we're about $70 million over, there is, I have a feeling that I'm going to be the villain of the Western world, that is going to be a real issue. We probably will come back to you with some scenarios like, why don't you put $25 million aside and have these projects presented to you so you can have a better feel of what they are. That's just an idea that we're looking at this time, and you can not, if that's an idea you don't like, then we can go on. But we will give you a list that we think is totally ARPA related, that really qualifies all for ARPA, and then several projects otherwise, and then other sources to fund these projects. We will look at budget stabilization. We will look at bonding.
So
we're not going to make $70 million no matter which way we look. I just want to.
Okay, but that was one of the questions I had. Just to be clear, you may come back with some options for council that include not just the ARPA money, but include budget stabilization and possible bonding.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And so part of the reason I think it's important to stress that is that I think the impression in the community is that we've got $121 million and we've got 160 or now, I don't know what the total is, as if it all had to come from that 121 million, and that's not the case.
It's not the case. I did make, when I was in, so that you all won't think the same thing I thought, I had a great bonding scheme, but Aaron shot me down real fast because I can't use this ARPA money to pay off the bond because it's that one-time money. And I can't use budget stabilization to do bond payments. So that sort of makes some things different. But when we talk, when we come back, what we will do is to give you a framework, and then you can either throw this all out or say, I don't like this, let's do it, a certain way. And this is just going to take us a while to work through. We're also going to be talking about some of the things that you talked about this morning. How do you cash flow some of this? You know, we've got $60 million in the bank now from this. We will get another 60 in May. What is the best way to cash flow? And there'll be a lot of things to be talked about, but I think it will give you a wonderful starting point, and will really start to focus this whole thing down. So that's what we intend to do, if that suits the council.
Thank you very much for that. My question for you is this. How soon after we come back from break would you be prepared to do this? Because I asked the question because I'm going to propose some tentative dates.
I think we looked at the 13th of January when you first come back, if that's to do it. Is that the 13th?
Okay, that's so we could schedule tentatively a committee of the whole meeting on Thursday, the 13th, 4 o'clock.
Because it's going to take you a while to really see this. This is just a big puzzle, and to see how you like the pieces to fit. Then we can go back and do something else. But we think we can do with the list we have, we think we can do a good piecing of this puzzle by the 13th that we can present to
Okay,
you.
and you would be able to circulate that a day or two before prior?
Yes, sir. We won't make the schedule of a week before, but we'll get it to you 2 or 3 days before.
Okay. In that case, I would entertain a motion to establish a committee of the whole meeting Thursday, January 13th at 4 o'clock. Have a motion and a second. Discussion? Councilmember Fred Brown.
4 o'clock, we've got a 6 o'clock council meeting
Yes.
that night, too. Would that give us enough time from 4 to 6? It never has before.
I think it would give us enough to start, but if council, I'll just tell you my preference. I'll go as early as people are comfortable. So if you want to modify the start time, so long as it's acceptable for everybody to be present. You want to move it? Okay.
I will be after I present this list.
Okay, so I heard a suggestion to make it 3 o'clock. Give us a little more time. Is there anybody that won't work for? Anybody? Councilmember Legree? Not?
I can change an appointment, then I can do it, but it's just an appointment I have to schedule months in advance, so
But 4 o'clock would work?
4 o'clock would work.
So I would propose that we tentatively set it for 3 with the understanding that we may need to back it up if that turns out to be impossible for Councilmember Legree.
And then what we would do is I would intend to explain, my intention is to explain why we would put everything where we put it. So I would go down the list, just project by project, saying why we would do what we did. And I'm sure you all agree.
Thank you. I believe procedurally, we need to basically say it's scheduled for 3 o'clock. And if we need to modify it, we can modify it, but that's the beginning place. Okay, Councilmember Fred Brown?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I need a clarification, I think. On the list that we previously worked on and items moved to the final list, and this is under economic opportunity initiatives, and the 10 million consideration of various projects, and the detail that we talked about there was consideration of various projects proposed during the robust community engagement process to be funded through a competitive process and awarded no later than spring 2022. And then in parentheses, it could include items like Distillery District, Town Branch Park, Ag Tech, Disc Golf, and then it's got dash 10 million. I would like to put Versailles Road in that category because this is the information that I thought we were going to get back from CAO related to those projects. That was my understanding.
Okay, so my understanding is that list is suggestive and not inclusive, but
Well, I want to be suggestive.
without objection, I would suggest, council, we just simply add it as one of the suggestions in that category. And
I need a
don't
motion,
think-
I'll move, but
If you would like to move it, or,
you can do it as chair, probably, just.
yeah, let me just say, we'll add that. Anything else? If not, just one other comment on my part, to be as clear as possible. What we have now is some projects that have been fully approved, and we have some projects which are on a list of tentative approval for further discussion. And, as always, additional motions will always be in order. So if there are items that people have not proposed, or they want to propose them differently, or whatever, and we may also be in the business of modifying that big list because we don't have enough money. But in any case, the main point I want to make, especially for the public, is that we're not done. That there's still, that the doors are open for additional motions for funding from the ARPA. So, Councilmember Maloney.
Thank you. Now, I know the winter months are coming up, and we just voted on the homeless issue here, and there may be an emergency for something like that. We got to do ASAP. I know we haven't finalized that vote, but some of those projects that I'm looking at, because we're not through the pandemic yet. Right now, the numbers are going sky high than we've had in a long time, on top of the flu. I just want to be sure that the administration has the power to use some of that ARPA money, like for the homeless and stuff, certain things, for emergency use, because if you all don't feel that way, then I just feel like we haven't seen the worst yet. And I think the next 3 months, 2 months, so there's no way we can do anything.
I inquired from, and I'm sure they're in the room to back me up. I inquired about some cars of police that were on the lots that we were interested in. And we do not, because in this meeting, I don't think you can make that kind of motion to spend that money, and we don't have any budget to go against, so we can't spend anything.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak at this point? Seeing none, I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion. Is there a second? I have a second. Without objection, we stand adjourned.